Hello, welcome to my presentation on the chemical profile of Sangio. Um, One thing to note about Sangiovese, it is a very acidic varietal. When we talk about acidity, one thing to note is that it can get real astringent real fast. We have to balance out our pH, our TA, make sure everything is moving smoothly on the palate. Um, and a couple characteristics we should know about Sangiovese before we get into the chemicals. Number one, it is an overgrower, overcropper. It's vigorous. It's a butt, right? So when it comes to managing our Sangio, we got to drop a lot of fruit. Otherwise, well, we could tie this into chemical stuff. The tannins are going to lower. It's going to oxidize quicker, and we're not going to want that. The other thing is our polymerized carbon chains and things like that. Those are gonna fall by the wayside because the dilution is higher. So we got to drop fruit. The other thing is that Sangio generally grows in a warmer climate. So if we were to, let's say, extrapolate that to Walla Walla, well, our growing season is a little bit shorter than it is over in Tuscany. It's a little bit warmer down there, and so with that, we're gonna probably have a more acidic presentation. So we're not gonna get away with quite as much smooth Brunella characteristics, and we're going to need to add a little bit of oak. Now, moving into acidity a little bit. With our acidity, we're hovering anywhere from around 3.4 to 3.7 pH. Now, we generally want to keep it below 3.6 for obvious reasons, but the important thing to note is that we're probably going to be climbing the ladder backwards towards 3 if we're growing it in a cooler climate like Walla Walla. Now, one of the fun things is that with the higher amount of potassium and the lower amount of nitrogen that we have here in Walla Walla, it's important to note that we're going to get a little bit less acidity for that reason, but it might all even out. I don't know the exact numbers on that. With fermentation and inoculation, number one thing, make sure we have enough nitrogen. Don't get a stuck fermentation. We also want to produce enough SO2 to back up the oxidative stress. This is a variety that is known for going the distance. It is a very long-lasting variety in the cellar, so that is usually as a result of the tannins, the acidity, and the other oxidative or antioxidants working together to last a long time. So with our fermentation, we need to make sure it's temperature controlled. We don't want a hot ferment because we got to get all the way up to 14% alcohol. We don't want everything dying off because, as we know, when our yeast dies off, it's not going to be able to make it all the way to our goal. Now, one thing that you could do with Sangiovese is you could introduce MLF earlier, right? You could co-inoculate. That's going to allow us to get things in line in terms of our acidity numbers. We can also make sure that we are picking the right yeast, because if we don't, then we could run into problems with acetic acid. We really want homofermenters on the MLF side. We don't want that byproduct because, again, we don't want our Sangiovese getting too astringent. Next up, vineyard planting and location. I think that this is a variety that you could really get away with in the Rocks district. You could also get away with it up towards the foothills, towards, let's say, Los Ovoidos or Lake Helene, places that have a little bit more hot air going up that place. But Rocks District, obviously, a little hotter as well, a little cooler in the winter time, so we would need to change our training methods and things like that. But yeah, so we're going to be dropping fruit either way. That'll help with nitrogen a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, we really just want to focus on getting enough tannin and antioxidants into the wine, because with higher tannins, it's going to measure out that acidity that we naturally battle with, and we don't want our wine to turn into vinegar, so we want to balance it out in that way. These are our important compounds in Sangio. This is moving from left to right. We have malic acid in the top left, then we have SO2 right below that. We have our tartaric acid in the middle, and then on the right we have our acetic acid. So obviously we want to get rid of that malic. We want to ferment it very early on. We want our SO2 levels to remain muted but still there, right? Because the acidity can't carry all of the weight of the stability that this has in the cellar, or on the shelf, I should say. Our tartaric, Also, I mean, again, along with the SO2, we need to make sure that's in balance. We don't want it precipitating out and getting unconventional. And our acetic, we need to keep below that legal limit, but we also need to make sure that it's in the right spot to add a nice profile to the wine. We want structure, we don't want chaos. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the methods for our vineyard management. So, we're going to need to be supplementing nitrogen. We're going to need to make sure that our training methods are hardy against our harsh winters here in Walla Walla. We also need to make sure that our bud break is protected. So I was looking at these really cool pictures in my irrigation class where they would actually spray sprinklers over the buds as they were about to get an early spring freeze. And what that would do is it would insulate the buds from frost damage as much, because if the ice is a thermal insulator, right, it's not going to actually kill the buds itself. But either way, lots of cool things you can do to keep Sangio alive and thriving here in Walla Walla, even though it is used to a lot warmer and more moderate climate in terms of fluctuations. The diurnal shift, that's not something we really can limit here in Walla Walla. That's just something we live with, right? So the Sangio actually might produce more tannins and thicker skins as a result of that, which would be a huge benefit, actually. But again, we got to watch the potassium levels. We got to watch out for that. Conclusion, I think Sangiovese is a really cool variety. I didn't know as much about it before this assignment, so it was really fun to dive into the details. And yeah, this was a great assignment. Read my written, because I basically put all the big academics in there, and this was just fun to kind of present on it. I know my slides were a little silly, but yeah, thank you.